Las ciencias de la acción humana, las que me he referido ahora en general,
The sciences of human action, to which I have referred in general, divide into two very large branches, theory and history.
la teoría de la acción humana sería
The theory of human action is economics as we have approached it up to now. That is, theory is a formal, abstract, qualitative and general study of the processes of human interaction.
mientras que la historia, la segunda rama esencial,
History, the other essential branch the social scientist needs, consists of the systematic study of past events related to human action. These past events related to human action may be from the distant past, which in colloquial terms we call history, or they may be from the recent or very recent past. In fact, what happened this morning is already history.
En las ciencias sociales, a la historia del pasado reciente...
In the social sciences, the history of the recent past is called the economic structure. That's why I've written here, history or structure. In colloquial terms, history refers to the events of the more distant past, and structure refers to recent history. The global economic structure, or Spain's economic structure, is the recent history of the global economy, or of Spain's economy. It is history from last month or last year, but it is history. In fact, everything that took place a second ago is already history.
Siguiendo la más pura tradición aristotélica,
in the purest Aristotelian tradition, remember Aristotle? It's not that I'm a fan of his. Actually, I'm even less a fan of Plato. I think he was an unforgivable scoundrel. And Socrates, we will see. We'll talk about Socrates when the time comes. Aristotle is an exception for the most part, but not entirely. He was, we might say, the salaried tutor of the greatest tyrannical, genocidal dictator of his time, Philip of Macedon. And he also tutored the wilder and more paranoid Alexander the Great. We'll talk about this later on. In any case, Aristotle did make a series of enormously valuable contributions, mainly in the field of epistemology. Aristotle makes a philosophical distinction between two concepts, the concept of form and the concept of matter. Form? Well, a person sees 1,000 glasses. A big glass, a small glass, a crystal glass, a plastic glass, a red glass, a white glass, a whiskey glass. In the end, we know the form of a glass, in theoretical or conceptual terms, regardless of any specific historical manifestation. The study of the form of human interactions in the Aristotelian sense gives rise to economic theory, and to that we will devote this course. Meanwhile, the study of the matter, the specific manifestation of a particular glass, so to speak, of human interactions, gives rise to history, both form and matter. Both theory and history are equally important when it comes to acquiring an adequate knowledge of social reality.
Repito que son igualmente importantes, se encuentran al mismo nivel, la teoría y la historia.
I repeat, they are equally important. Theory and history are at the same level. However, according to Carl Menger, the following is crucial. First, we must not make the error of failing to distinguish between theory and history. It's true that they're equally important, but they're different. Epistemologically, theory is one thing, form, and history is something different. Second, we must avoid committing the even more fundamental error of thinking we can deduce theoretical or formal laws from a knowledge of history, in other words, from matter. In the time of Menger, the founder of the Austrian school, this was the error committed by the German historicists led by Schmoller. Today, a legion of positivists and even mathematical equilibrium economists are committing this error. They believe that by conducting numerous historical studies or empirical tests, they can come to know something in theoretical terms. Nevertheless, as I will show later on, the nature of the relationship between theory and history is exactly the opposite. We cannot deduce any theoretical knowledge from history. Instead, the reverse is true. We can only practice history by interpreting past events in light of a prior theory, which we have been able to independently formulate. It is impossible to deduce theory from history. We have already seen that social and historical events are extremely complex, and that they consist of unobservable ideas others have about what they do or did in the past. No one can observe history, but a person can interpret it and sort out those complex phenomena if he or she first has a theory. In other words, theory is the sine qua non, or essential condition for practicing history, for interpreting historical events. Without a prior theory, there is no historical reality, but instead just an incomprehensible mass of events and data.
De hecho, les tengo que decir, la evolución de Mises es curiosa. Mises estudia Derecho y su
In fact, I must say, Mises' development was curious. Mises studied law, and his first book was about history. He wanted to be a historian, and he wrote a book about the history of servitude in Galicia. Not Spanish Galicia, but Austro-Hungarian Galicia, close to Hungary. When he finished writing his book, he came across a copy of Menger's work, Principles of Economics, and Mises became aware of his own ignorance. He said to himself, I can't be a historian if I don't become an economic theorist first, because I can't interpret what goes on. So I'm going to first make the effort to become an economist, and that is why you have human action. Mises' goal was to be a historian, but he understood that he could not practice history at all without first having a formal, conceptual, theoretical framework, and so he became a great theorist. We must begin by understanding that theory is one thing. It is knowledge that is general, abstract, and formal, related to form, and it concerns the processes of historical interaction. And history is something different. History is specific knowledge about past events connected with human action. To practice history, we must first have a theory. That is why there's an arrow here, pointing from left to right. We can't know anything about history if we don't first have a theory that enables us to interpret real events. Popper, who isn't a hero of mine, wrote, "All facts are theory-laden." That is, all historical facts are loaded with theory. I am even more radical than Popper, and I join Mises in saying that there is no history without theory. Why? Because without a formal conceptual framework, we cannot interpret past events related to human action. We cannot interpret the economist's object of research, which is ideas others have about what they do, about the ends that are worthwhile and the means they believe are available to help them achieve these ends. Therefore, theory is essential to the practice of history. It is the necessary condition for the practice of history.